She was standing at the top of the world, and no one had any idea she was barely holding on. One of the most recognized faces on the planet. A name that made studios lean forward and audiences hold their breath. And yet, behind those unforgettable blue eyes, behind every perfect performance, behind every magazine cover that made her look untouchable, there was a secret. A wound. A version of her life that the world was never supposed to see. This is the moment that changes everything you thought you knew about Michelle Pfeiffer. In the late 1980s, Hollywood was calling her a once-in-a-generation talent. Critics didn't just admire her, they were in awe. The roles were pouring in. The praise was deafening. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. A woman who had climbed to the very peak of one of the most brutal industries in the world and made it look effortless. But there was a moment. A quiet, private moment, when she stood in front of a mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back at her, not because fame had changed her face, but because something had taken her from herself and she had let it happen. What she eventually told the world left people speechless. It made fans cry in ways they didn't expect. It forced everyone who had ever admired her to stop and look again. Because the real story of Michelle Pfeiffer isn't just about talent or beauty or Hollywood glory. It's about survival. And it starts somewhere nobody would ever guess. Michelle Pfeiffer grew up in Midway City, California, a quiet, working-class suburb where extraordinary things simply weren't supposed to happen. She was the second of 4 children. Her father fixed heating units. Her mother stayed home. There was nothing about her upbringing that pointed toward the bright lights. She was shy, quiet. The kind of girl who blended into rooms rather than commanding them. After high school, she enrolled in community college to study court reporting. That was the plan. That was the life she saw ahead of her. But then someone noticed something. Almost on impulse, she entered a local beauty pageant. And almost by accident, the kind of accident that rewrites an entire life, she won Miss Orange County in 1978. A door opened, small at first. Television commercials, bit parts. Background roles that should have kept her invisible, but the camera refused to ignore her. Even in the smallest, most forgettable scenes, there was something happening that directors couldn't explain and audiences couldn't look away from. A presence. Something raw and magnetic beneath the surface. She didn't just appear on screen, she arrived. And once she was there, you couldn't take your eyes off her. Grease 2 in 1982 was not a great film. But somehow Michelle glowed through it anyway. Then Scarface in 1983, alongside Al Pacino, and suddenly Hollywood stopped whispering and started paying very close attention. By the late 1980s, she was everywhere. The Witches of Eastwick, Dangerous Liaisons, Married to the Mob, Academy Award nominations. Critics running out of ways to describe what she was doing on screen. She looked happy, she looked whole. But what no one knew, what she had never told anyone, was that she had already been through something that nearly destroyed her before any of it even began. Here is the part of Michelle Pfeiffer's story that almost no one saw coming. Before the fame, before the nominations. Before anyone knew her name, there was a period in her early 20s when a young, searching Michelle fell under the influence of a couple running what she would later call a cult. They described themselves as breatharians, people who believed, who genuinely taught that the human body could survive on nothing but air and sunlight. No food, no water, just belief. It sounds impossible, but she was young, she was looking for something, and they found her at exactly the right moment of vulnerability. She followed their teachings. She let them control what she ate, which was almost nothing. She let them shape her thoughts, her identity, her sense of what was real, and when she finally got out, she was severely malnourished. She had to relearn how to eat, relearn how to trust herself, relearn what was true and what had been constructed for her. But what happened next changed everything, because even after escaping all of that, the damage didn't simply disappear, it followed her. Into the auditions, into the roles. Into the years of extraordinary success that the rest of the world was busy celebrating. She battled an eating disorder through much of her career. A battle fought silently behind closed doors while she delivered performance after performance that left critics breathless. Insecurity doesn't care about applause. It doesn't retreat just because the world tells you that you're extraordinary. And for Michelle Pfeiffer, the higher her star climbed, the more relentlessly those private demons seemed to hold on. She has spoken about it carefully over the years, never performing the pain, never dramatizing it for sympathy. Just telling the truth in the measured, honest way of someone who has genuinely made peace with something terrible. She sat there in silence in those interviews, clearly choosing each word, clearly aware of what it costs to say these things out loud. I was one of those people that were lucky, she once reflected quietly. I got out, but getting out wasn't a single clean moment, it was years. Years of quiet, private work happening in the middle of one of the most public careers in the world. And at the same time, her personal life was fracturing beneath the surface. Her first marriage, to actor Peter Horton, ended in divorce in 1988. The same year she delivered what many consider the defining performance of her career in Dangerous Liaisons. She was being celebrated on every screen and in every magazine while privately watching a chapter of her life close forever. Then 1989 arrived, The Fabulous Baker Boys. The film where she draped herself across a grand piano in a red dress and sang Mackin' Whoopee, and every person in every cinema simply forgot to breathe for a moment. Another Oscar nomination. Another layer of legend added to the image, but the truth behind that image was far more complicated than anyone watching could have imagined. Then came 1992. And nothing was ever quite the same again. Batman Returns, Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, the performance was electric, dangerous. Layered with something that felt deeply personal. A woman who had been shattered and had rebuilt herself from the broken pieces into something fierce and free, and impossible to look away from. People who knew even fragments of her story couldn't help but feel it, that this wasn't entirely acting. She received a Golden Globe nomination. The costume became iconic. The character became iconic. She became something larger than a movie star that year. She became a symbol. And then she walked away from all of it. Not because of failure, not because of scandal, but because she chose to. She had met television writer and producer David E. Kelley in 1993. They married that same year. She had already adopted a daughter, Claudia, as a single mother shortly before they met. Together, she and David welcomed a son, John, and Michelle Pfeiffer made a decision that Hollywood still struggles to fully understand. She chose her family over the machine. Major roles were turned down, roles that eventually became legendary films with other actresses. She became more selective, more private. Less available to the industry that had built her up and would have happily consumed everything she had left to give. People whispered that her career was finished, that she had made a fatal mistake. That no one walks away from that kind of momentum and comes back from it, but Michelle wasn't walking away. She was, for the first time in a very long time, choosing herself. The years that followed were quieter. She continued working What Lies Beneath, White Oleander, I Am Sam, never truly disappearing but refusing to be everywhere. And Hollywood, being what it is, began to do what it always does to women who step back, even briefly. The roles became fewer, the calls became less urgent, the conversation shifted. There is a particular cruelty in the way this industry treats women of a certain age. Michelle Pfeiffer has spoken about it with the kind of measured honesty that takes courage. About walking into rooms and feeling the evaluation happen in real time. About quality of work mattering less than a number. About moments of genuine uncertainty, wondering quietly whether the best of it was already behind her. She sat with that uncertainty, she didn't perform defiance about it, she just kept going. And then came the moment nobody saw coming. Ant-Man and the Wasp, a Marvel universe with billions of fans. A whole new generation of moviegoers seeing Michelle Pfeiffer for the first time, and understanding immediately why the world had fallen in love with her decades before they were born. She stepped back into the spotlight and reminded everyone exactly what they had been missing. Then Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. Then French Exit, which earned her some of the most glowing reviews of her entire career. Awards conversations were reignited, critics were reaching for superlatives again. She hadn't slowed down. She had simply been patient, and the world had finally caught up to her again. Today, Michelle Pfeiffer is in her mid-60s, and she has never looked more at peace. She speaks openly now about the cult, about the eating disorder, about every choice she made that the industry couldn't understand. She speaks without apology and without performance. Just a woman who went through extraordinary things and came out the other side still standing, still extraordinary, still that presence that the camera cannot ignore no matter how many years pass. But here is what moves people most when they talk about her now. It isn't the performances, though those are breathtaking. It isn't the beauty or the legacy or the cultural impact. It's the survival. It's knowing that the woman who gave the world Catwoman, who gave the world Elvira, who delivered some of the most stunning performances in cinema history, was quietly fighting for her own life the entire time. Carrying things that would have broken most people and still showing up, still delivering, still becoming one of the greatest to ever do it. Michelle Pfeiffer didn't just build a career. She built a life on her own terms in her own time by her own definition of what success was supposed to mean. And that, more than any role she has ever played, is the performance worth admiring. So tell me, does knowing all of this change how you see her? Does it make those performances hit differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This community always has something real to say, and we genuinely read every single one. And if this story moved you even a little, hit subscribe. Because we tell the stories behind the names you think you already know, and there is always so much more beneath the surface. Don't miss what's coming next.